You know, in the world of big enterprise systems, just moving files around is this constant, absolutely critical job. So today, we're going to demystify a key player in that whole process, the SAP FTP adapter. Let's break down exactly how it works.
So let's kick things off with a challenge that honestly every single business has to deal with. How do you get data from point A to point B, especially when that data is packed into a file? I'm talking about things like batch updates, daily reports, or swapping data with your partners. It's happening all the time. So how do you manage that reliably?
Well, the tool we're going to zero in on today is SAP's FTP adapter. The best way to think of it is like a specialized postal service that lives right inside the SAP Integration Suite. It's built for one thing, mastering file transfers to and from any standard FTP server out there.
Okay, so the best way to wrap our heads around this is to just follow the data's journey. First up, the inbound journey. We're going to see how a file gets from some external server into your SAP system. And it does that using something called the FTP sender adapter.
Now here's the part that might seem a little backwards at first. Even though it's called a sender adapter, it's actually your SAP system that starts the conversation. It actively reaches out and pulls the file from the FTP server. So don't think of it as just sitting there waiting. Think of it as an active puller that goes out and grabs the data it needs.
You know, a really simple analogy makes this super clear. The sender adapter is basically your company's mailroom clerk. This clerk doesn't just wait for mail to show up. Nope, they proactively go to the post office, that's our FTP server, on a set schedule to pick up any packages that are waiting for the company.
And when you get down to configuring this, it really just boils down to answering three basic questions. The Source tab is all about where to look for the file. The Processing tab defines what you're going to do with it once you've picked it up. And the Scheduler tab, well, that just determines when to go looking. That's it. Where, what, and when. All right, so that covers data coming in. But what about sending data out? Well, for that, we just flip the whole script and use the FTP receiver adapter. And just as you'd expect, the flow here is the complete opposite. Now, the SAP system is in the driver's seat, initiating the connection and actively pushing the file to its destination FTP server. The receiver's entire job is to write or deliver that file. So, let's go back to our mailroom clerk analogy. The receiver adapter is that same clerk, but now they're handling the outgoing mail. They're the ones who take the packages that are ready to be sent from your system and actually deliver them to the post office for somebody else to come and get. Now for the receiver, you first define the destination on the Target tab. Simple enough. But then you have to answer a really critical question. What happens if a file with the exact same name is already sitting there? This happens all the time. You have to tell the system exactly what to do. Should it append the new data? Overwrite the old file completely? Just ignore the new one? Or should it fail the whole process? Getting this rule right is absolutely key to preventing data loss. All right, so we've covered the basics of sending and receiving. Now let's dive into the nitty-gritty details that make these processes really robust and reliable. These are the configurations you'll definitely need to master. So, one of the first big decisions you have to make for the sender is what to do with a file after you've successfully processed it, right? Because you can't just leave it there or it'll get picked up over and over again. The simplest thing is to just delete it. A much safer choice, especially for auditing, is to move it to an archive folder. And if your permissions are kind of limited, you can just tell the adapter to mark the file as processed, which basically tells it to ignore that file name on all future checks. Okay, this next idea, this is absolutely critical for making sure your data is solid. It's called the read-lock strategy. And the problem it solves is simple. How do you stop your adapter from grabbing a file while some other system is still busy writing to it? I mean, reading an incomplete file can cause all sorts of massive errors. So to prevent this, you can tell the adapter to wait for some kind of signal, like a separate little dot file, or you can have it watch the file until its size stops changing, which is a good sign that it's finally ready to be read. And hey, here's a little pro tip for you, especially if you're dealing with a ton of files. The adapter has this little quirk. If your file names get longer than 100 characters, it might not process them in parallel. This can seriously create a bottleneck, so it's just something to be aware of when you're coming up with your file naming rules. Okay, so let's bring it all together now. Putting them side by side like this makes the different jobs of the sender and the receiver adapters perfectly clear. It really just boils down to this. The sender adapter, it handles all your inbound traffic. Its main goal is to read from a source. The receiver adapter handles outbound traffic. Its main goal is to write to a target. Sender reads, receiver writes. Simple as that.
All right, before we wrap this up, let's quickly go over a few crucial tips and limitations that you absolutely need to know before you start building anything.
Look, remembering these little rules can save you a massive headache later. First, this adapter is only for FTP and its secure cousin, FTPS. It does not, and I mean does not, support SFTP. That's a totally different protocol, and it needs its own special adapter. Also, just so you know, under the hood, this thing only supports passive mode FTP, and it always transfers files in binary mode.
And all of this brings us to one last really important question I want to leave you with. While this adapter is a super powerful and reliable tool for moving files around, you should always be asking yourself, is standard FTP, even with some encryption, secure enough for the data I'm handling? Is the data sensitive? Are there any compliance rules I need to worry about? Knowing how to use the tool is only half the battle. Knowing when to use it, well, that's the other half.